now, but all right, well, let's jump in. Mostly, I just wanted you to say, first of all, like, how, what age are your kids and what borough you're in? And then after that, we'll get into the stories of your admissions nightmares. So Janice, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, my name is Janice Tsao. I live in Manhattan and I have a child right now in pre-K. She just turned 5. So.
Okay. And Vasundhara?
So hey, I'm Vasundhara and I have my older one who is now eligible for pre-K. So he's born May 2017. And so we're currently applying to start September 2021. I have a younger one, but he's much younger. We never went to 3K. We're in Manhattan, Central Park South. So we come under District 2. And our zone school seems to be PS 111, but I don't think we have a 3K in our district.
Okay. 3K, you said?
Yeah, we don't have a 3K, but we do have like lots of pre-Ks.
Yes, and you may have heard that 3K is expanding in the fall. It will be in every district, although there will not be enough spaces for every child. So that's big new news. Okay, so thanks a lot. Janice, can you just tell us, your pre-K, you're in pre-K. So if you could tell us, what it's been like. You can talk about the search, you can talk about the experience, and I think you have 2 experiences, so go right ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so my daughter was in the 3K program. At the time, I lived in District 4 in East Harlem. So there are more 3K programs up there. Anyone can apply to any of them, but so she was in a 3K in a public school, so PS whatever. And then right now, in the middle of the year, I moved. So I'm now in District 2. So my experience has been going to an in-district school, going to an out-of-district school, that kind of thing. I've applied in and out of the district, both for unzoned and zoned schools. And then when I applied for the pre-K program, they have different programs. They have the regular district school, so like PS whatever. Then they also have the PreK Centers where the whole school is just pre-K. And then they have these early education centers. So it's kind of related to the DOE, but they don't follow exactly the curriculum or the calendar. It's slight differences, but so something like a New York Kids Club, that kind of thing. So I kind of applied to, I applied to all 3 types, honestly. So I applied to 10 schools. I didn't do the 12 because I was already in a 3K. So I think the school had told me like, yeah, if you want the spot, you'll get the pre-K spot. So I didn't go 12 deep. So as far as things I looked for, I actually happened to, because I have a personal situation where my apartment lease was expiring, in a weird time. So I knew I was going to have to make my pre-K and kindergarten decisions like kind of early. So I actually had done my school tours back when they had tours like a year prior. So it ends up being very, a smart decision, not by my planning, because when COVID hit, you can't see anything in person now. So, so that was helpful. And then some considerations that I looked at when I was where to apply. I looked at geographic proximity, how long my commute was going to be. If you have obviously your child, like how are they going to be waking up early and possibly commuting however many minutes, that kind of thing. Also for me, how long my commute was going to be pre and post move, and also factoring in with COVID. Like I'm a spreadsheet person. So I did, how many days do I think will be in person that I have to commute versus not, like that kind of thing. So, and obviously, hopefully some kind of diversity within the class. I didn't look too much at the curriculum, so to speak, because at that age it's more the socialization aspect, and they're, even if it's a pre-K center versus an early education center versus a district school, directionally they're all going to be teaching similar themes for your child, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. And then another thing that I used a lot, which was in the New York schools, my school's account, which is challenging to navigate, was looking at when they have who got accepted last year. So is it every kid out, some people in district got it, siblings, nobody of this kind, and then that kind of gives you an idea of what your chances are going forward. Having said that, COVID changes everything. For example, I was applying to the school that my child is in now is a PreK Center on the Upper East Side. So at the time I was applying across districts. So my chances were probably not great. At the time that the initial assignments came out, at some point we were like 120 on the wait list, which in normal times, forget it. But then, people left the city or whatnot. So gradually it came down, and then we ended up getting 2 spots. So.
Yes. Yeah, we do hear that wait lists move even in pre and post pandemic times. A couple things I wanted to just slow down and highlight. So
Sure.
the PreK centers were brought in areas that there weren't enough pre-Ks in district schools. They, in old warehouses or just spaces, PreK centers were created. So they tend to be still relatively new, not predating 2013 or 14. And they're all geared towards young children, which some people kind of like. Even the security guard, when you come in, will let the kid play with the keys. It's just all geared towards 4s and 3s if they have 3s too. Did you find that, Janice, that differences with district schools and PreK Center?
Yeah, so to your point about the PreK Center being just that grade, specifically the point with COVID now, you hear a lot of schools being shut down if they have 2 or more cases, and that tends to be a higher, I think, where the schools, like a regular school where it's like pre-K up to 5th grade, because you have the older kids. So I think the PreK centers have had fewer school closures because of that. I mean, again, who knows what COVID will be like next year, but that is a consideration, definitely. So, and yeah, it is very, I do like it that it is very, the whole school is the the pre-K kid. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, our building is relatively new, and they take all the precautions. So it's been a good experience for us. And my daughter's in a hybrid blended learning, so.
Okay, we'll get back to that daily stuff in a minute.
Sure.
Another thing I wanted to highlight about early education centers, which can be in so many different kinds of settings, like community centers like WISE. They can be in religious schools, but they're not teaching religious instruction during those hours. They can be in many, many different kinds of settings. And early education centers sometimes, not always, but sometimes have a little more flexibility. So children might have naps. The day might be a little longer, so the children might have naps when they're tired, and sometimes there's less flexibility that way in a district school for little kids. Not always, but feel free to jump in, Janice, if you're
right. And something that is very COVID specific is when we had to go to the blended learning, a friend of mine whose daughter was in an early education center, they were kind of like along the lines of the private schools. They still kept going 5 days a week, full days, so then I was like, oh, so things that you just don't know given these times, but that's a consideration for this year's parents potentially.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you, Janice. That's great. A rich mine of information. And please ask questions in the chat if you have questions. Vasundhara, well, how about you? What have you found? You're not yet in pre-K, so what has the hunt been like? And what have the roadblocks been and the challenges? And where are you with?
Yeah, so I'm also a spreadsheet person like Janice. So I have put together sort of an obsessive spreadsheet with, what's the distance from home for drop off, what's going to be the distance for my babysitter to do pickups, where do they offer late hours. So a lot of the public schools will say, all right, school might end at 2:45, but we have an additional 2 hours or 3 hours or into 5 or 6 p.m. And that becomes a consideration as the kids get a little bit older, especially because for me, what I've also been thinking about as well, if it's a consideration for schools to take siblings, then the older one better get into the one we want so that the little one also gets into the same place. But it did boil down to sort of, for me, my list is, I've already put it in my schools. I still haven't hit submit. But the way I've ended up ranking it, and I might change it now with a lot of Janice's input, is, I've based it on proximity, ease of drop off, some of the ratings on inside schools. Like, so inside schools will say like staff pick, or like some of the other little, notations. And of course, I'm not sure how does it change, what's the priority in the sense that will they just match us to our zone school, or will they also keep it open that we could send our kid to the unzoned schools, which are close by and which are also very highly rated on inside schools. But for me, like the way my thought process is shifting as we have this conversation as well, I actually do want him to go 5 days a week. He's old enough that he really does need the socialization. In fact, I can clearly see even as he's turning 4 soon, he's missed that a lot this year, as all kids have. And so maybe, I'll change priorities, because in our area, we have a lot of these early education centers and places like the Y, et cetera, which probably, like Janice said, will not have that hybrid, which will continue of 5 days in person.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts.
This is really helpful, Janice, because that was sort of news to me too. That I did talk to a parent who has a child in a public school, and she said they only meet for what they call synchronous learning. So the teacher is live, like we are right now, twice a week. Twice a day, half an hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. And then the kids who are doing blended are doing 2 days, 2 mornings 1 week, 3 mornings the next week. So it's really good to ask settings and don't feel shy or hesitant to email. I don't know if you've done that, Janice and Vasundhara, email or call the settings to ask some of these questions. I think that's, sometimes we need permission to do that.
Yeah, no, we have been emailing and getting a lot of great information. The thing we haven't been able to do, because it's sort of such a special year, is that we haven't been able to do site visits. And so, when you read some of the reviews that say, oh, the facilities are super cramped, like one of the choices we have on our list is Midtown West, which is an unzoned school. It's called PS 212, which is very highly rated. And yet, like, the problem is, the classrooms are super cramped, the facilities are extremely old. And so, for some of these things, you're like, well, if I could just see it, maybe by my standards, it's not cramped.
I actually did a tour of them last year, and it's a typical New York school that's going to be crowded and older. You know what I mean? So if you like it in general, and again, COVID, who knows how that affects everything. But yeah, they're all going to be kind of directionally similar in that sense, I think.
Yeah. And I've been inside. I found it kind of charming. I like the old thick walls, and it's a sweet place. But I think that's interesting what you're saying. I wonder if both of you were at first looking for one kind of setting, like district schools. Like first you were thinking, I'm going to go to a neighborhood school for pre-K, and then that shifted, or if figuring out the different kinds of settings was difficult. Vasundhara, you're recently off it. So.
It was awful. So when I started examining what our options are, and I was looking only initially, just like I said, I hadn't found inside schools till a week later to actually just clearly explain to me the differences. I was muddling through my schools and saying, okay, so this is a public school. This is a NYEEC. What the hell does that mean? Let me Google that. That's an early education center. This is a district pre-K. I was like, what the hell is that? And so like, if you're just muddling through it without having sat down and spoken with a mom or having looked at inside schools, it can be really challenging. And then like Janice just kind of summarized very beautifully, and no one gave me that summary. So I was like, well, so which one's better? Like, where do I want my kid to be? Do I want them to be at a district school so that I know, well, we have the spot and we would likely then have the K spot and then we're like all set till 5? Or do I consider an early education center? Would it be like more cuddly for my child who's just been mollycoddled till 4? And so it's been challenging, but like with them, just my husband and I muddling through it. I mean, the great thing has been a couple of moms at work who've been very sort of useful with providing guidance because their own kids had been through it. But my advice would be, before you even start muddling with websites, is to speak with the moms. That's what changes the game. You get a summary in 10 minutes of what you muddle through for an hour.
Yeah, I think that's right, that people speak in a way that's not quite such bureaucracy speak when they're talking about these things, which is kind of the intent of this lunch hour chat too. So people should chime in the chat if they have questions and or confusions about like the types of settings. So again, I just want to say there are PreK Centers, which they're not that many, 111 actually, that were set up since 2013 in different spaces. They're all about 4-year-olds and sometimes 3-year-olds, and they're quite nice. We visited many of them. There are district schools. About a third of the PreK seats are in district schools. And then there's these early childhood centers, which are all over the place. There are religious schools and private schools and community centers and Ys. There's Head Starts, which are income eligible. So if you make a certain income, then you're eligible for those. And that's longer days, longer hours, year round. Lots of good childcare there. So just to recap on the options. I was wondering if there's something, Janice, you wish you'd known before, like that you could tell these people who are in the midst of it now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the different centers will be similar curriculum. As far as differences, so I don't know if anyone cares, but if you're into the PTA, the PreK centers and the early education centers will not have a PTA just because it's just the 1 year. So they figure, why bother? Some people think that's a good thing because then you won't get solicited or asked to be in the PTA. But if you wanted that, then you'll have to wait till your elementary school years. As far as like the early education centers, some of them will have, so especially the ones that are like a New York Kids Club or whatnot, who already have programs that you have to pay for like younger kids. They will give priority to, obviously, to the kids who they already paid for the 3K to kind of, or the preschool. So your chances in general aren't probably as good there, but definitely if you want something, apply for it. Things that were, so some of those that I just mentioned could be advantages or disadvantages depending on what you're looking for. And as far as what was surprising or difficult about my hunt, I find, and I know Vasantara was talking about talking to the moms, so that's very helpful. But also, like, what I experienced was a lot of people in New York are very, like, they'll keep things close to the vest, and they think that they have some secret sauce that if they don't share the information, like, they have an advantage. But to be honest, if they know it, chances are like a million other parents know it too. So I found that kind of discouraging, but pretty quickly I learned, okay, I can't rely on this person trying to give me helpful feedback, which is why I'm kind of participating in something like this, because I'm all about knowledge sharing. Put it all out there. Everyone get the information. Why have someone recreate the wheel, reinvent the wheel?
Hey, it's Wendy. Give me a call. Bye.
So,
yourself. Yeah.
So, the more people I can help, the better. So that was kind of, or people who say, oh yeah, call me and we can talk. I'll be happy to go through this with you. And then when you actually ask them to meet, they kind of come up with excuses, or, they don't really want to help you. So I found that, but that's true about anything, but just kind of, and don't take everything the parent says, or take everything with a grain of salt, even if it's like, and, to be fair, even to like sites like the Inside School, like, like the data, whatever, it's very good, but don't like rely 100% on it. Use it as a guide, but, also, since you can't do tours right now, do what you can, like walk around the neighborhood. Do you feel you like, is there something sketchy that you don't like around there, or you feel comfortable? Can you see your child attending? That kind of thing. Like, do whatever research you can.
Yeah, I do that too. I walk past the preschools to look at the buildings they're in, because if it's in the parlor floor of a brownstone, that tells you something. First of all, I'd want to know where they're going to play. So I visited all the pre-Ks in my neighborhood, Upper West Side, and I found like one was in the basement. The kids walked to Riverside Park to play. These are things you can find out by asking or going at drop-off or pickup when parents are standing outside. Usually they're often willing to share.
Right.
Sundara, do you want to jump in? Have you found people asking other parents is helpful, and other clues for these?
I mean, I think finding someone who's been through it very recently is the key, because even some colleagues whose kids are now, like, say, in 3rd grade, they've completely forgotten about how just foreign it can feel in the beginning, and how it's just a brand new thing to learn in life. And so I think, you know, what I found was my conversations with those mothers was the most helpful, whose kids had been through it very recently. I mean, I agree with Janice. I think some people either can't recall or remember, or just may not be the most helpful in general. You know, one thing that was playing on my mind as we were talking about visits is, yes, we've emailed certain schools or early education centers to get a little more information, but to be very blunt, does schmoozing help in the sense that, like, if you say, oh, like, I really want my kid to come here, can we do a virtual online tour or something, you know, and express that sense of keenness, especially if you're very sure about a certain spot, like, will that help us? And should we be doing that now that the deadline is barely a week away?
Are you asking, should we, or are you suggesting?
No, should we? Like, because I haven't done it.
I see.
Yeah.
I guess I have to, yeah, I'm going to share an anecdote I just learned from one father who said he did get some in-person tours. You know, I hate to throw that wrench into your spreadsheets, but he did. He got 10 minutes at 2 different pre-Ks. I don't know the names of the pre-Ks, but it was sort of like, whoa, some people are giving tours. These were people who had one parent here and the other one was moving. They were moving to New York City. So probably they had no clue, you know, what, I don't know what they said, but sometimes the squeaky wheel. I mean, you always have to be polite, though. You know, everyone knows that. But I'm a former educator. You know, if you do a little begging and that kind of thing, just be super diplomatic and polite about it. But sometimes it does help. I was curious to hear a little more, Janice, from what pre-K is like right now. If you could sort of paint the picture of what your days are like.
Sure, no problem. So as I mentioned, my daughter's in the blended learning. So she goes over the course of 2 weeks. She'll be in person 5 days. So 1 week is 2 days, and the next week is 3 days. So 2 of those days, like, you know, it's every Thursday, Friday, and then every other Monday. So the school days have been shortened by about 50 minutes this year. So the normal school year is, I don't know, 6 hours and 20 minutes or something like that, but now it's even shorter. So for a working parent who I'm the sole parent. So for me and I work from home, so I like to do pickup, drop off. It's, you know, challenging, but, you know, you get through it. So basically their day consists of if you want, you could have your meals there. So breakfast, lunch, and snack. It's supposedly healthy, but I kind of question that sometimes. But anyway, so they'll eat breakfast, then they'll do different what called centers where they go and they can play with blocks or art or, you know, different things. And then in general, the schools will do themes or units. So like they just finished a unit on clothing, and then a unit on buildings or careers or the weather, that kind of things, where they spend several weeks dealing with that and learning and, you know, different things about that, whether it's story time videos, or they even walked around the block, you know, a couple times as their field trip or whatnot. And then they also have a rest time. So some kids won't be napping, like my child doesn't nap anymore. So they just have the child like kind of lie down on their mat and relax for however many minutes, like 20 minutes or whatever. And then, yeah, different lessons, including learning to write better and, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of their day. So all of the places will have relatively similar schedules, more or less, on it.
Yeah, that's helpful. And you said a lot of things, which are the things when we can do it in person or when we can find pictures, things we look for in a pre-K. Mostly the pre-Ks I've visited are sort of similar. You know, it's block building, dramatic play, a little bit of rest, some reading, some early pre-writing and writing, letter sounds. They don't vary too much. What can vary is how the teachers interact with the students, the way that they sort of up the ante with vocabulary when they speak to them. They use new words and engage them and help them further their learning through play and things like that. So these are just some things. We have nice lists on Inside Schools, our core site, just a nice little short list of things to look for in a pre-K. That's also things you can ask about. But some of these things are parts of the New York City curriculum, you know, so their kids have to get outside every day. They have to have a space to eat that's their own, where they can practice their social skills and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
and to Vasunhara's concern about not seeing the schools. Yeah, I mean, definitely, obviously, I'm very visual too, so it helps to obviously be there and to see the things, but I wouldn't stress out too much about that, given that, you know, especially for the pre-K, but for the elementary schools too, they're all, yeah, after a while, I mean, I toured a bunch of them, and after a while, you're just like, okay, yeah, the nice block, yeah, you got the blocks, you get the, you know, like, and to be honest, when you do tours for either for pre-K or elementary school, you never really, you don't, I don't find you get too much real information, because, you know, it's like a, you know, like it's a quick tour for a broad audience. So, you know, if you know, people tend to ask the same questions, you know, and so, and I find that a lot of the answers are very generic, you know, like, also because think about who's giving the tour, you know, they're not going to pick the person who's like, oh, let me tell you how it really is here. So yeah, if you want, you probably have to talk to parents that you know to kind of get the real scoop, so to speak, because everything else will be like, oh yeah, that looks good. You have a science lab. Oh yeah, you know, it
yeah.
looks pretty nice, you know. So unless the building's totally falling apart, you know, and you know, paint's peeling or something, but yeah.
I mean, in New York, you know, in pre-K, you're gonna, if you are pre-K in a public school, then your child's the youngest, right? And there's all these older kids above them. It's kind of nice advantages. And then in a pre-K center, your kid is, if they're 4, they're the oldest. If they're 3, they're the youngest. And that's just, it's, you know, then you're in a pool of parents all with the same age kids, which is also kind of fun. True in a district school too, in your pre-K. But there's also priorities, and I'm sure, I don't know if anyone watching this today has questions about priorities. Siblings in a zone school always come first. It's like siblings, and then, but you do have to check the priorities on My Schools, which you have to scroll down a bit. You have to press what says pre-K, and you have to look at the priorities. It's a little hard to find, but you have to look at the priorities to see if you have chances of getting into that pre-K program. We do suggest, you know, Janice says she applied to 10. Good, because you want to have some choice rather than no choice.
Yeah, there's also somebody on the site, I think someone had posted, I don't know if they're on here, but someone had posted a question of on the Inside School Plus thing, as far as like, if they live and want like their zone school, should they still put it first or should they put it last? Yeah, I would say you definitely want to put it first, because especially even for pre-K, a lot of times there aren't enough spots still. Right. And there are pre-Ks that, you know, when I looked last year, it was like nobody in the zone got in, because all of the spots, which is only like 18 or so, like all of the spots went to siblings. So if you have, and you just don't know that year if there are a lot of people in your neighborhood who had siblings that were born that year or whatever, so you don't know. So they could have not gotten a spot too. So that's why when I looked at that and I said, oh, if nobody even in the zone got it, then my chance is like, I mean, I'll put it on there, but I'll put it number, you know, 10, because I'm probably not going to get that. But
yeah, so that's a thing. There might be 100 kindergarten seats and only 18 pre-K seats in a school. So obviously there's not enough pre-K for those 100 kindergartners. So then it's going to be siblings first. And yeah. So Erica, did you have a question?
I did, thanks. Actually, I had a few. I'm just going to put that, because I was wondering how, the first question is about class sizes for the pre-Ks and the 4s. I was also wondering, like, some of the schools, like, how do you get the contact information? Do you just call the main number on the school page? And then the third thing is actually in terms of the priorities, as you're talking about, like, if you list them and say you get your like, you know, choice 1 or choice 2, but then you decide, like, if you accept and then you decide you don't want to do that, can you take it away? Like, how much flexibility?
I think I mean, my understanding, and Lydie, if you could tell me, I think if you're lucky enough to get your top spot, like, you accept it and then you're done. Like, I don't know if you reject it. I don't think you can then go further down. Like it'll go the reverse. Like if you don't get your number 1, 2, 3, and they give you your number 4, you're automatically on the wait list for those without doing anything. And then it just kind of moves up, you know, or down. I actually had moved down a little bit as more people in my higher priority rankings, like some people who were like in the district or who had higher priority, they kind of moved up. So I actually moved down spots too in certain schools, but
I was asking the questions because the deadline's coming up for submission. And
Yeah.
like the one PreK Center, I was going to go on a virtual tour, and then they canceled it because there weren't enough parents. And so I was anticipating like I might do some more stuff, some more research after I submit, and so my preferences might change. So I was just that's kind of where the question is coming from.
Oh, that you can't, I mean, once you've submitted, but yeah.
Yeah, but then once they assign it, then I was wondering how, yeah, so, okay, I think I got the answer. But.
Okay, yeah, and you're waitlisted for all the ones above the one you didn't get in. If you do accept or register for one, then you get in one you preferred, you can switch to the one you preferred. So there's a lot of shuffling that goes around, like reshuffling because of people choosing, and then other things open up. I hope that's not too confusing. 18 kids for 2 adults in pre-K. Laura, I'm sort of spacing out. Is it 16 for 2 in 3K? I just sometimes forget the numbers, but it's.
I think it was like 15
for 2 adults in 3K or something.
For 3K. But then to be honest, especially this year, like our teacher's whole class was only 12 kids. And then between that, because of the blended learning, they split it, and they didn't split it equally. So our cohort is like only 4 kids.
Yeah, they've been really small this year. That's what I've heard. Sundara, do you want to jump in with anything that you've heard?
I don't know anything about class sizes, but I did have a question, and Janice might have already talked about this. So as your child is transitioning from pre-K into K, do you find like, because what I caught on was that your child is at a early education center, is that right? Or district pre-K?
She's in a PreK Center. Yeah.
A pre-K center.
So part of the DOE. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you found that as you're transitioning to K, that there's any disadvantages of being at a pre-K center as opposed to being in a public school?
No, the only thing is because it's a pre-K center and it's the only grade, every kid there has to go to a different school next year. So obviously I would have preferred, I would have probably gone straight to a district school, like the one that you want your kid to go into, because if they can get into there, they have a priority for kindergarten in case there are tons of kids next year going to kindergarten. But at the time I was living across districts, so my chance of getting into the D2 school was like hardly anything, so yeah.
I had one more kind of geographic question, just bouncing off of that. So while we live in District 2, we're sort of very close to the Upper West Side and so bordering District 3. And so do they ever consider, when you put this list together, what your actual distance from home is? Because we're actually, no,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's very, this is, like a algorithm thing. I think it's just like, are you D2? Like, what district are you in? X, Y, and then you get placed into the bucket, I think. I mean, if you don't, when you're applying to kindergarten, like my understanding is if you happen to not get into your zone school, I heard that they try to get you like geographically the closest one. So if you geographically are across the street from the D3 school, maybe they'll do that. But if it's on your list, but yeah, I don't think,
I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah, parents really have a lot of questions about that very complicated algorithm that's used by the DOE to figure out who goes where according to the lists. And there is a video on the DOE site that's probably the clearest explanation of how kids filter into schools. So it's just right on the admissions page. It's helpful to look at it. But they always say, and we always say, put your true order of preference on the admissions, true order of preference. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. Does anyone else in this session have questions? You can put it in the chat. You can say it out loud. We're such a small number. Vasundhara and Janice, this is incredibly helpful. If there's anything else you want to jump in and say, I've already learned a lot myself. Like 5 days a week for centers. That's so interesting during the pandemic.
Yeah. No, all I have to say is, I put my email in the chat. So in case anyone has questions,
Very
I'd be more than happy to talk to at length later. It's mutzi@hotmail.com. And then all I have to say is at the end of the day, it's been a challenging year, and this whole process is kind of nerve-wracking for everyone. But at the end of the day, no matter where your child ends up, like, your child will be okay and you'll be okay too.
And what I really heard you both strongly say was convenience, proximity. Those things are important because little kids get tired, and also because little kids need happy parents. And if happy parents means you have a little more time, to wander or get home for that nap, that can make a big difference in your life and your quality of life. So, just putting it out there again, if anyone has questions. Otherwise, really appreciate everyone coming. This will be available for other parents to look at. Vasundhara, heroic of you to come from the Central Park Zoo. I think that's amazing. We didn't get to see any animals, but thanks for coming.
It's been incredibly educational. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Janice.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.